Chapter 81. One last thing, you are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there, and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstapy. Back to a few weeks ago, after Edward gave Bellatrix permission to study Obscurus. A door opened, and Edward walked out while wearing a cloak. As soon he removed it, his body appeared inside his laboratory, and the cloak suddenly dissipated. It seems that the invisible cloak I made using the power of law from the Deathly Hallow cannot last long. This might cause a little trouble, muttered Edward, then he ignored it. If he did not need to remain invisible to Death's view, he would not go to such lengths. Ever since he started building his word gate, he sometimes felt an invisible gaze looking at him. At first, Edward thought that this was just the result of his paranoia, but as the number of times increased, he realized that it was not so. So, he placed countless anti-surveillance enchantments in his laboratory, but it was of no use. At that time, he did not know that death was a real existence, let alone the only god in this universe. So, after his first meeting with it, Edward realized who was spying on him. Thus, he planned countermeasures. Since death is not able to visit the physical world, and the afterlife existed in a separate dimension, death has to go through countless spaces and time to spy on him from there. Based on this assumption, he researched how to make the void of space around his laboratory in a state of constant turbulence, thus hindering any sight from far away. And when he managed to study the time Turner, he also placed a temporal disturbance or turbulence. Of course, in order to accomplish these feats, he had to use a massive amount of magic power from the ley line nodes. This is one of the main reasons that he decided to move his laboratory and the gate on the moon. He did not want any powerful wizard to sense the massive amount of magical power he was using and became interested in his business. Then, after Edward met Harry Potter wandering in the Always during Christmas break, he suddenly thought about using the invisible cloak to better hide himself and his experiments. However, he also feared that the cloak was useless to Death. After all, he made it himself. Luckily for him, after experimenting and testing, he realized that it was indeed effective. Of course, he did not stop using the previous method. Additionally, after breaking the first limiter, his soul became even more sensitive and it became much easier for him to sense death. Knowing this, the latter stopped so directly spying. As for Edward, he was not happy or suddenly become arrogant because of that fact. He knew perfectly well that the reason he could do so was more because Death's power was very limited/restricted by something or someone. Back to the present. After Edward removed the invisible cloak, a temporal power appeared trying to age him by 67 years. Fortunately, his previous ring still worked and blocked the effect. After that, he went to an isolated room and removed something from his bag. It was a floating mass of blackness. This was the Obscurus that Newt removed from the Sudanese girl back in 1926. Edward secretly went there to steal it. Let's see if my theory is correct and whether these experiments are worth it. He removed a piece of the law from the Resurrection Stone, controlled the Obscurus based on his research on Credence to try to destroy it. After very close observation, Edward muttered. It does work, however, the process is slow that it is insignificant. In that case, what if I add this? He took out a Philosopher's Stone and used the massive magic power within to fuel the Obscurus. It worked, said Edward with excitement. Although it took more than 3 minutes to destroy such a small amount, it still works. As long as I have enough Obscurus, and enough Philosopher's Stone or a large enough one, I can threaten death. I always thought that my path as a wizard would eventually lead me to control the laws of the world. But, this is not necessarily the only path. As long as the energy intensity is high enough, or as long as a force is powerful enough, they can destroy the power of law. It seems that I have been too heavily influenced by the cultivation novels of my past life. Scene break. After the meeting with Death, after updating the information about Death, he made sure that the only Obscurus he had available was with him, along with a Philosopher's Stone. Then, he realized that there were only a few days before school started. With so much happening this summer, he lost track of time. However, he still had one last thing to do. He first went back to his manor on Earth, sent a letter to someone. After receiving a reply, he used the Flu network to teleport somewhere. "Edward, my boy, what brings you to see me today? You know, now you are a world-renowned star in the magical world," asked Nicholas Flamel with a smile on his face. Nicholas and his wife attended Edward's announcement of the three-counter curses after receiving an invitation. However, not wanting to be recognized or interacting with other people, they disguised themselves. "Haven't I always been famous?" replied Edward. "Not on this scale. Sit. I've made tea." After the two chatted for a while, Nicholas Flamel asked. "So, what brought you to see me today?" "I've come to ask for your help," replied Edward. "If there is something that even you cannot do, how can I help? Plus, I'm old and have no more energy for this kind of thing." Both Edward and Nicholas knew that they were not simply talking about an exchange of ideas. With Nicholas' wisdom, he could tell that Edward's invitation was to join his side and help him accompany his ambitions. Edward took a sip of his tea before saying, "Do not be so quick to reject me. I know that you and your wife have decided to move on to the afterlife, but have you truly lived long enough? You saw some of my memories, saw some of the things that I plan to achieve. As an alchemist, don't you want to take a part in this? Furthermore, as long as you decide to help me, I can easily solve the problem of you and your wife due to the Philosopher's Stone. Additionally, I can also promise long-lasting youth on top of immortality." Nicholas frowned after hearing this. He was not that tempted by lasting youth, even if it would be nice. What made him hesitate was Edward's words regarding participating in creating some of the alchemy wonders that he saw in his memories. After seeing his hesitation, Edward did not further persuade him. He stood up, took out a document. "This is what I want you to help me with. To research on how to create a Philosopher's Stone using only emotions instead of souls. With your help and my suggestions, this project would only take a little amount of time before bearing fruit. And such an achievement is enough to change the civilization of wizards and advance it forward by centuries if not more. If you decided to help, just send me a letter." After that, he left. A few days passed, and the first day of Edward's second year at Hogwarts as a professor finally arrived. While dressing up, he received a letter from an owl. The sender was Nicholas Flamel. After opening it, there was only one word. "Yes." "So," Edward smiled after seeing it. "So you guys seem to have misunderstood my words. I did not mean that Edward would go to the Warhammer world right after Harry Potter. If that was the case, he would just immediately run away. I'm talking about the future once he becomes stronger. As such, one day, Edward Bones will be the new god, emperor of mankind. So, please bow to your new ruler that will lead humanity in the fight against the Chaos Gods using knowledge and powers from many different universes and dimensions." Title: The Beginning of the Second Year. Chapter 82. The beginning of the second year. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/pnsestapy. Edward sat on the high table of the teachers, talking with everyone present. Because of his recent achievements, he was more famous than before, so many of his colleagues thought that he would not come back to teach. So, after seeing him, many had many questions, and Edward responded to all of them. And it was not just the teachers who were curious, but many of the students. After all, they spent the entire summer constantly hearing news about Edward in the newspaper. "Well, it seems that my class will become more popular this year," muttered Edward. All the other teachers rolled their eyes after hearing this. Even many of them wanted to take his class given the option, let alone these easily influential students. Finally, it was time for the Sorting Hat to do its job. All the teachers and students quiet down, providing Edward with a little breathing room. However, he received a mind-link communication invitation from Professor Flitwick. "So, how does it feel to steal Dumbledore's title of the greatest wizard of the 20th century? Just like the headmaster does not care for such a title, I do not as well. But, you have to be at least a little proud of yourself," asked Phileas with a smirk in his voice. "Of course, who does not like to be praised?" replied Edward. "Adding to that all the beautiful women of the magical world that have sent secret invitations to me over the past month, well, let's just say that celebrity life has been very kind to me." Professor Flitwick sighed as he said back. "How many times I advised you to find a proper girl to marry. I am afraid that this will be the only time that you are disappointed in me, Professor." Flitwick sighed to himself but did not say anything. "On a more serious note, do you have to do what you are doing?" "Unfortunately, yes," replied Edward. "However, I can guarantee you that my method will be the most efficient and the one with the least resistance and casualties." Professor Flitwick was silent for a brief moment. "Well, I already decided to side with you, there is no need to regret now. I can honestly tell you that you have made the right choice. And as I promised you before, I would never force you to do something that you did not wish to do. I know. So, how are you enjoying my library?" A deep sigh ringed in Edward's mind after asking this question. "I never expected that you have so much lost knowledge, that you have created so much new knowledge, and I keep wondering how much wizardkind would develop as a whole given access to all this knowledge. This is the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. By sharing my knowledge in the hope that even more can be created, thus creating a perfect cycle that drives wizard civilization forwards." "I agree with you on that," replied Professor Flitwick. "However, I discover that I only have level 2 clearance. What about the higher levels? What exactly is there?" However, Edward did not answer him, just smiled at him, so the professor did not mention the topic again. Currently, there are only 2 people with level 3 access, Bellatrix and Snape. And it is still temporary. And the reason for that is because he controls their lives. As for the Death Eaters, despite their loyalty they only have level 1 clearance. The only person with level 4 clearance in his library is his aunt and little Susan. But even she did not know this as she was too young. And that level of clearance does not only grant them access to his library but also has a safety protocol. As long as any one of them is in any form of trouble, a special alchemy item he gave them will send a signal to the World Gate which will then activate all its powers to save their lives by teleporting them away. If that cannot be achieved, the gate is even designed to initiate a self-destruction sequence in an attempt to save their lives. After all, Edward only has one family, and the gate can still be rebuilt. In the future, Edward will grant people a higher level of clearances, but that is only when all his plans come to fruition and the entire planet is completely grasped in his hand. After finishing his talk with his favorite professor, Edward noticed that his cousin was not in a good mood, and she kept giving him angry glimpses. So, he initiated a mind-link communication with her. "Little Susan, what's wrong? I have not seen you for most of the entire summer. And you did not even send me a few letters." "Well, as you can see, me and Auntie Amelia have been very busy recently." "That's not an excuse to not even write a letter explaining the situation." "Well, you are right. How can I make it up to you?" "You cannot. How about I take you on a vacation during the Christmas break to any countries of your choosing," replied Edward. "You mean that?" Of course. I can accept your term if for the entire break. I can only do 3 days. I do not see any sincerity with your actions, complained Susan. All right, for the entire break, added Edward helplessly. That's more like it. Okay, I will tell you another good news, said Edward. This year, you can do your best to win the cup for the Hufflepuff's house, and I can guarantee that the headmaster will not intervene. Really? In that case, this year's house cup belongs to our house. I always warn you to not be too cocky, otherwise it is easier to make unintended mistakes, warned Edward. I know. Then, the two chatted for a while about a lot of miscellaneous things before disconnecting the connection. By then, the sorting hat ceremony was over and it was time for everybody to eat their food. After a quick check, Edward realized that all the people from the books were still sorted in the same place as the canon timeline. However, there was still a major difference. Harry Potter and Ron Weasley were at the Gryffindor's dinner table. With Edward taking Voldemort's diary and erasing Dobby's memory, the house.elf had no reason to stop Harry from attending Hogwarts. So, he and Ron were not forced to use a flying car to arrive at school. It seems that death did not lie to me. The correcting force of fate did not manifest as usual to place everything back to the original timeline. Title: Plans in Motion. Chapter 83. Plans in Motion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstapy. After the dinner was over, Edward planned to go back to his room but was stopped midway by a student. Hermione Granger. Professor Bones, congratulations on all your achievements. Who would have thought that studying the dark arts could have such benefit? Thank you, Miss Granger. So, how can I help you? Oh, first, I would like to thank you for the gift you gave me at the end of last year. Gift? Oh, you mean the alchemy item that allowed you to practice magic at home without the Ministry of Magic knowing? Yes. I spent the entire summer constantly practicing as you told me to. Now, I can find my magic core on my own, and easily control my magic power. Wonderful. Not every wizard your age can have the patience to do these boring practices every day. Especially when the early advantages cannot be seen, said Edward approvingly. So, is that the only reason you came to see me? Hermione hesitated a bit before saying. Professor, I would like to take your alchemy class this year. Miss Granger, my class is only for the 3rd year and up. I know this, but I would like to know if I could take the class this year. Edward was a little surprised by this request and he looked at her up and down. He could see a patient for knowledge like him, but hers was tamer and had no direction. Meanwhile, Hermione, taking Edward's silence for refusal, hurriedly explained. During the summer, I've read all the books for the 2nd grade and 3rd grade. Although I could not understand some of the contents, I believe that my knowledge is enough to equal students in the 3rd year. Plus, Professor, didn't you say that you like to help talented students like me? With your help, I can quickly make up the knowledge that I need for your class. Edward was momentarily speechless. Since when were 12 years old so cunning? After pondering for a moment, he said. I have no problem with you joining my class or helping you with your study. But for this kind of decision, you should probably contact Professor McGonagall to get her approval and deal with the issue of schedule. No problem, Professor. Then she ran towards Professor McGonagall's office. Scene break. Late at night, Edward slowly walked towards the 2nd floor girls' lavatory. As soon as he entered, the ghost named Myrtle was quite surprised. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could say something, she saw Edward's eyes turn a weird gray color, then she fainted. When she wakes up in a few hours, she will not have any memories of the past hours. Including seeing Edward. After dealing with her, he used Parseltongue to open the door to the Chamber of Secrets. With his flying ability, he easily reached the location where Salazar Slytherin's massive status is located. He then used Parseltongue to control the basilisk. After seeing the large snake creature, Edward straight up looked at it in his eyes without being affected. He was testing the basilisk's magic on himself. He first used transfiguration to make a pair of glasses and test the effect. Soon, he concluded that this was able to dramatically reduce the effect of the spell. Then, he looked at it straight into the eyes while using his massive magic power to try to offset the effect of the spell on him. The result was quite effective. Following this, Edward took out an animal from his bag. It was a normal tiger. He then asked the basilisk to use his spell on it. Using his wand to check the petrified tiger, Edward used his wand to check the condition of the tiger. Interesting, the basilisk can absorb life energy from his victims. Could this be the reason it can live for so long? After that, he also checked the basilisk's body. It seems that it is true. By absorbing its victim's life energy to replenish his, it can increase his lifespan. However, this might not be the only reason for its long life. Anyway, after studying it, I should be able to not only discover its secret but create a basilisk of my own. The last time I tried to create one by hatching a chicken egg underneath a toad. Like Herpo the Fowl, it was a complete failure. After doing his initial examination of this powerful magical beast, Edward returned to his quarter. Scene break. Minister Fudge was walking back and forth in his office, worry oozing out of his pores. A while ago, Dumbledore sent him a letter warning him that the Bones family might be plotting to take his position of Minister of Magic from him. At first, he was deeply worried about the letter, but soon, a rumor rapidly spread throughout the entire Ministry of Magic. And that was the fact that Dumbledore was not happy about Fudge, and thus planning to run for office. After acquiring this news, he rushed to investigate it. Compared to Amelia Bones, who has never shown any desire for power, he was more worried about the possibility of Dumbledore running for his position. After all, the man's prestige in the magical world was overwhelming. So, Minister Fudge spent a great deal of time secretly investigating whether this news was correct or not. He secretly spied on all the people Dumbledore was close to him. However, recently, Fudge has discovered a disturbing fact. While he was guarding against Dumbledore, the prestige of the Bones family. Amelia, to be precise, had reached an unimaginable level. Her level of support among both the ordinary wizard and the people of the Ministry of Magic. He knew that if she ran for the position, his chances of winning were close to nothing. And as shrewd as Fudge is, he guessed that the rumor about Dumbledore was nothing but a tactic to distract him. While Fudge was deep in thought, someone walked into his office. He reined in his thought to ask. "How is Dolores? Did you confirm anything?" A flash of cunningness flashed across her eyes as she said. "I'm sorry, Minister, but everyone seems to be acting normally." "Is that so? Could it that you are being a little paranoid? After all, there is no evidence to prove that Amelia Bones is preparing to run for the position of Minister of Magic. You don't understand. I have an extraordinary sense of these kinds of things. Her recent actions are completely different from normal. It does not mean that she is planning to take your position." Then, what else could it mean? Dolores Umbridge became silent for a moment after hearing. "So, what are your next step of action?" After pondering for a moment, Fudge replied. "In this situation, my best course of action is to have Dumbledore openly support it. However, given my recent actions, and the rising prestige of Edward Bones, my chances are still dimmed." After a deep sigh, Fudge started writing a letter to Dumbledore. He felt that all the progress he made this past summer was gone. During his first year as minister, he was not so confident. As such, he always asked the headmaster for advice. However, in his second year, he was planning on doing things on his own. But now, he was back to asking for help. Fudge lamented on how difficult it is for him as a minister of magic. Sorry I did not post a chapter yesterday. In the chapters, I reached the stage where Edward is ready to conquer the world, bring everybody together, have a time skip, complete his gate, and travel to other worlds. However, despite having an outline of the next step of the story, I could not find a proper way to write that, especially since everything has to be reasonable. I swear at one point in time I almost wrote that Edward suddenly awakening a system that can grant him knowledge as long as he does some tasks. Now that I've taken a break, I finally have some ideas on how to write the next part of the story. Title: Rivalry. Chapter 84. Rivalry. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there, and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and The Otsutsuki Clan. A Legacy of Blood and Destruction. It's a Naruto fanfic with an evil MC born in the Otsutsuki clan. Join the Discord. https://forward//psty_py___________________________________________. 2 days later, Edward was sitting in his office dealing with a few things. He first sent a package to the Flammels containing a potion that would deal with the side effects of long-term use of the Philosopher's Stone. The potion is designed to slowly release the grievances that entangled the magic power of the couples. Of course, with Edward's understanding of the soul, he could solve their problems instantly, but he did not do so. The reason being that Perenelle Flammel used to be a wizard that broke the second limiter. Although Edward knew that having a large magic power was not equivalent to being powerful, and with all his magical skills, he could easily defeat her. Nevertheless, he did not want to take any risk. So, he opted to use a solution that would take time. Until he discovers a method to break his second limiter, the couples would have to wait. After dealing with this problem, he started planning things that he needed to accomplish during this school year. I should probably formally organize the dueling club. Having the students train to reach the level of heart of the club is a good way to train their will, making using magic much easier. While Edward was revising his teaching plans, Hermione ran into his office with excitement written all over her face. "Miss Granger, you need to calm down, otherwise you risk tripping and falling," replied Edward without raising his head from his desk. "I'm sorry, Professor. It's fine as long as you watch out for next time. So, what brings you to my office today?" Professor McGonagall agreed to my request after asking the headmaster. "Is that so? Then, what about the issue of schedule? That problem is also fixed too. Although I will have to take classes with other houses, in general, there is no major problem." Edward nodded as he understood her meaning. Most of Gryffindor's classes are with Slytherin, while most of Ravenclaw's classes are with Hufflepuff. Now, Hermione will have to take some classes with the Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff group. That means you will not have as many classes with your friends. Are you all right with that, Miss Granger?" asked Edward as he finally raised his head from his desk. "It's only potion class and history of magic." "That's fine." "Did Professor McGonagall say anything else?" "Yes. She said that you have to ensure that I have the necessary skills to be able to keep up in your class." Edward nodded his head, then reached out to take out a book from a compartment in his desk before handing it to her. "Professor, what is this? Look at it yourself." Hermione opened the book, then a little surprised flashed across her eyes as some kind of information was transmitted into her mind. Then, she took out her wand and followed the directions in her mind. Soon, Hermione found herself in a strange classroom, and Professor Bones was in front of her explaining magic to her. It started from theory, followed by practice. He explained the meaning of the gestures, the incantations, the use of magic power, and even explained different ways that a spell can be used. Hermione was fascinated by how deep and detailed his explanation was, especially compared to the other professors. Soon after the lesson was done, she found herself still in the classroom. However, she felt a little lightheaded. "How long has passed, Professor?" "A few minutes." Hermione was surprised as she spent more than an hour listening to that lesson. However, she figured it might be a result of this strange book. She looked at the outline, which showed all the different lessons that she could learn. It involved charms, potions, transfiguration, and even lessons on magical animal care. There also was a small section regarding ancient runes. Suddenly seemed to think of something, Hermione asked. "Professor, I remember seeing Susan Bones holding a book similar to this." "Yes, she has many of them." "How long has she been studying like this?" "Probably around 8 years old," replied Edward calmly. "No wonder she knows so much about magic," thought Hermione. "But now, I won't lose to her." "Well, Professor, I have to go back. Thanks for all the help." Edward could see that she wanted to use the book as soon as possible, but he still warned her. "Do not use the perception dilation of the book too much, otherwise it will give you a massive headache, making you unable to do anything for a few days. And if you further push yourself after the headaches, then your soul will be affected." Hermione was surprised by the severe warnings, so she took it to heart, so she nodded. However, she had a final question. "Professor, after taking your class, would I be able to make alchemy items like this book?" "Of course," nodded Edward. Then, with a joyous smile on her face, Hermione left, and Edward went back to his teaching plan. However, a few hours later, someone else barged into his room. "Little Susan, what's on your mind?" asked Edward, again without raising his head. "I just saw Hermione Granger with an alchemy item just like mine. Did you give it to her?" "Yes. Why did you give her one?" "Because she is a very talented witch, and I would like to develop all her potential." Susan snorted before saying, "I know you better than this, there must be another reason for doing this." Finally, Edward raised his head from his desk, looked at her with a smile. "It's because I discovered recently that you have been a little too cocky because of your little achievements. So, I figure that having someone as talented if not more compete with you would ground you more." "She is not more talented than me," rebutted Susan. "Then prove it to me. Prove to me that while she has the same advantage as you, you can still win against her." Susan gritted her teeth after hearing this. If it was any other person, she would be confident. But she knows how talented Hermione was based on their competition last year. She knows that her overwhelming advantage over her opponent last year was due to all the advanced knowledge that she had access to at a young age. But now, this advantage was gone. Nevertheless, she would not back down from a fight. "I will," said Susan before turning to leave the classroom. Meanwhile, Edward smiled as he said, "By the way, Hermione just got permission from Professor McGonagall to attend my class a year in advance." Susan paused for a fleeting moment after hearing this before continuing her exit. However, her direction changed to Professor McGonagall's office. "If you guys have not already, you should go check out my Naruto fanfic. Although there are only 11 chapters, they are really good." Title: Year 2, First Class. Chapter 85. Year 2. First Class. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and The Otsutsuki Clan. A legacy of blood and destruction, it's a Naruto fanfic with an evil MC born in the Otsutsuki clan. Join the Discord. https://discord.gg/bnsestfy. Edward was standing in front of his class waiting for all his students to enter. As soon as they walked in, their eyes seemed to shine like anime characters after laying eyes on him. Once everybody was properly seated, Edward started class by first saying, "I know all of you are excited to have such a smart, handsome, talented, and famous teacher as me, but this is not the time for any shenanigans." The class laughed out. "I promised all of you that after class is over, if there is enough time, I will answer all the questions that you have. Understand?" The students nodded. "In that case, let's begin. Last semester, to get you guys interested in alchemy, I taught you the fun aspect of it. This semester, I will teach you the boring and tiring aspects of it." One student raised their hand. "Yes, Mr. Diggory. Professor, last semester, I thought you said that we were going to learn amalgam enchantment." "That is correct, but there are many other steps needed beforehand. Let me give you a demonstration first." Edward then placed his wand on his temple to draw a silver white string, then he waved into the air. Suddenly, a large image appeared in the classroom like a holographic device. In the image, Edward was in a heated room full of different machines. He was wearing loose clothes and many metals were in front of him. He took two of them, melt them separately before mixing them with different ratios to create a new alloy. After that, he then melts the new alloy again, placed it on a machine that shaped it in the form of a sword. After the sword cooled down, he hammered, then sharpened the edge, created a handle for it. As you can see, I have very little understanding of how swords and different alloys are made, how metals are processed, and so on, so bear with it. Once everything was done, he used an enchantment pen to write the word incendio on the finished swords. Unfortunately, after activating the enchantments, a massive fire appeared and instantly melted the sword. Then, Edward went to work again. He used different metals with different combinations, and sometimes, he even used some weird potion when created the magical alloy for the sword. However, the process failed each time. In the second attempt, the blade exploded into countless pieces. In the third attempt, the enchantment did not even work. In the fourth attempt, the fire could not be controlled, almost burning Edward's hand. It took at least 8 tries before he succeeded. As you can see, this semester, we will learn about different metals, both magical and non-magical, and their properties. How to mix them to get the best alloy for an alchemy item, which one has the best conductibility of magic, which is more durable, more ductile, etc. Through trial and error, you guys will have to learn the hard way how to make alchemy items from scratch. One student raised her hand and Edward identified her as one of the Muggle-born students in his class. "Yes, Ms. Klein." "Sir, why do you look like a Muggle blacksmith during the entire process? Why didn't you use any magic?" Of course, Ms. Klein was secretly complaining why the professor was not shirtless during the process, and many of the witches were thinking the same thing. After all of them were now 15 years old, reaching the age when their adolescent hormones were in full motion. Luckily, Edward did not have the habit of using legilimency on his students. Great question. Let me show you guys another demonstration. Following this, another large image of Edward appeared in the class. This time, he was also forging a sword, but using magic. With a wave of his wand, the metals in his possession melted, then he mixed them to create the appropriate alloy. Then, he controlled the magical alloy to turn in the shape of the sword, used another spell to cool it down. Afterward, used another spell to remove the impurity from the metals, and a final one to sharpen the edges. Finally, he enchanted it with his pen. The entire process only took about an hour. "As you can see, class," said Edward. "Relying on magic to make an alchemy item required a great deal of strength and ability for spell casting, something that many of you in the classroom currently lack. So, throughout this semester, while you learn the old-fashioned way, I will also be teaching you some of the spells essential to an alchemist. Of course, this is not the main reason that I want you all to learn the ways of a blacksmith. It's because this method allows you to have a hands-on approach to the different metals. It allows you to personally experiment with different ores and learn about their properties through trial and error. The students nodded. However, they do not think that class would be as boring as the professor said if they have to do what he showed on these images. However, one student had a question. Yes, Mr. George Weasley. Professor, I'm Fred. No, you're not, replied Edward calmly. How do you know? I just know. What's your question, Mr. Weasley? I have two questions. One, is there an even better alchemy method than the one you just showed us? Secondly, where is our classroom going to get all these types of equipment to practice? Ambitious aren't we, Mr. Weasley? Well, there is. Then, Edward showed them another image. This time, Edward engraved a few ancient runes on two different metals, then used his wand to activate them. Following this, the two metals turned into a goo-like substance before blending into a brand new ore. The process only took a few seconds. After that, Edward inscribed a few more runes before activating them. This time, the alloy instantly turned into a beautiful silver sword, glistening under the sun. For the last step, he placed enchantments on them. Just like that, in less than 15 minutes, an alchemy item was created. Professor, is that transfiguration? No, this kind of magic is called transmutation. What's the difference? How do I explain this for you guys to completely understand, said Edward as he paused for a moment. Okay, the material used to make the sword is called white silver. To make such a material, brown copper and ordinary silver need to be mixed together. Using transfiguration, I can directly turn the brown copper or ordinary silver into the white silver, or even directly into the sword. However, transmutation needs to use both raw materials to first make the white silver, then transform it into the sword. More importantly, transfiguration is not permanent, but transmutation is. But, Professor, I thought you said last year that you could turn base metal into gold, but only lasting for 6 months. And you also said that there was another grand alchemist who achieved a permanent change, said Fred Weasley. That's true. At the highest level, transmutation can barely reach the level of transfiguration. As for the permanent change of metals, that requires the Philosopher's Stone to achieve. And what is the Philosopher's Stone? Asked one student. Something that you will learn later on, but if any of you are curious, you are more than welcome to research it in the library, replied Edward calmly. Now, back to Mr. George's question. I have modified one of the Hogwarts classrooms to include many blacksmith equipments, and this will be our classroom from now on. Professor, can we see it? The new classroom. Sure, why not? He then used the same previous method to show them their future classroom. Although some people were secretly dissatisfied that they did not directly go there, there was nothing that they could do. In the classroom showed by Edward, there were many furnaces, ores lying everywhere, a powerful heat could be felt emanating inside. The size of the room was oddly too large as there was enough space for every student to have their equipment. Edward placed an extension charm in the classroom, hence the size. Now, as you can see, working in such an environment, accidents are prone to happen. As your professor, it is my job to guarantee your safety, but if an accident occurs because any of you decided not to follow the regulations, then I will kick you out of the classroom. After 3 repeated strikes, I will remove you from the entire course. Is that clear? Yes, Professor, responded all the students with a dignified look on their faces. Good. Now that we have a little time before the end of class, you can ask all the questions you were dying to ask me. Following this, all the students raised their hands. With a sigh, Edward picked one at random, and the rest of the class was spent with him answering questions about either his personal life or about his recent accomplishments during the summer. Title: Small Confrontation. Chapter 86. Small Confrontation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and The Otsutsuki Clan. A Legacy of Blood and Destruction. It's a Naruto fanfic with an evil MC born in the Otsutsuki Clan. Join the Discord. https://py.psytypy____________________________________________. After class, Edward waved for 3 students to stay behind, and they were Cedric Diggory and the Weasley twins. So, did you guys make good use of the alchemy items and books that I gave you last summer? Asked Edward while looking at them. Yes, Professor, quickly replied Cedric. Over the summer, I practiced non-stop until I could locate and wield my magic power and magic core. Additionally, my father sent his gratitude for the precious gifts. Edward nodded in satisfaction, then his gaze turned to the twins who looked like they had done something wrong. So, did you guys not practice? Oh no, we did, replied the two together. Then, why do you look so guilty? Well, at first, we did not practice due to how boring it was, said Fred. But, Percy was snooping in our room and he discovered the books and magical items, then he told our parents, continued George. After our mother discovered how precious such knowledge was, she was very thankful that you were willing to give it to us, so she forced us to practice. Professor, it was really hard and boring, but we did manage to find our magic powers and cores. Edward finally nodded in satisfaction. This does not explain the look on your faces. So, if you have something to say, do it now. Well, said Fred. Our mother was wondering whether we can use the books and alchemy items to help little Ginny. And Ron. And Ron to also discover their latent abilities. And even, let other members of the family use it as well. Edward could guess the gist of things based on their brief explanation. Mrs. Weasley probably feared that the gifts were meant only for the twins, so she did not want to overstep her boundary and let all the members of her family use them. So, she asked for permission. And given Cedric's reaction, he might have faced a similar problem with his father. So, Edward said. Since I gave these things, it is rightfully yours and you can do whatever you please with it. Edward has never been stingy with sharing knowledge. To him, knowledge about magic powers and magic cores should be taught at every magical school in the world as part of the first-year curriculum. In that case, we offer our gratitude, said Cedric and the twins. Edward just calmly nodded, then he took out 2 books from his desk. Before you go, these are for you, they should help you in your study. All 3 of them once again became surprised after opening the book and read the information sent into their minds. They thanked Edward one last time before leaving. Scene break. Hermione, Harry, and Ron were walking in the hallway heading to class. Harry asked. Hermione, where were you? I did not see you in potion class. I told you guys that my schedule is different now since I have to take alchemy class. Isn't that a class for 3rd years? Asked Ron. I told you guys about me taking it ahead of time, didn't you hear a word I said? The 2 of them laughed a little embarrassed. Wanting to change the subject, Harry said. The strangest thing happened in class today. That's right. Snape was acting nice to Harry. Not acting nice, but more like he no longer targets me anymore. As far as I'm concerned, that's acting nice, muttered Ron. Harry, didn't you say that Snape also visited your house during the summer? Asked Hermione. Yes. He forced my aunt and uncle to give me a better room and make sure that they treated me properly. He even threatened to turn them into toads if they did something bad to me. No wonder you looked a little fatter than usual, said Ron. However, Harry ignored him as he continued. I honestly feel like Snape is up to something, but I do not know what. Do you guys have any ideas? Unfortunately, none of them did, and they soon reached their classroom. A few hours later, the trio walked out of their classroom. Well, that was Bullocks, said Ron. Why did the school hire such an incompetent professor as Lockhart, said Hermione in annoyance. I thought you were a big fan of his books, said Ron with a smirk. That's before I knew that he could not even cast a proper spell. Then, the three of them headed back to their house's lounge. Scene break. Edward was sitting in his office when he received a letter from the headmaster. So, he packed up his things and went to his office. After playing a little with Fawkes, he sat in front of the headmaster. So, to what do I owe this meeting? Asked Edward. Right to the point, I see, said Dumbledore. In that case, I will be direct. I know that the invisible cloak that you gave Harry Potter is not the original one, so I would like for you to return the real one. With a calm look on his face, he replied, unfortunately, I cannot do so. Oh, and why is that? Recently, I have had a little confrontation with death, and I need the power of the Deathly Hallow to hide from his prying eyes. Dumbledore frowned after hearing this. As a person who once owned 2 of the Deathly Hallows, he sometimes could feel death's gaze and its temptation to gather all of them, the temptation that he might be able to see his sister again, and right the wrong of his past. So, he knew the power of such a god-like being. Isn't there any room for maneuver in this situation? Asked the headmaster. Unfortunately, no. However, I'm not an unreasonable person. I can compensate Potter for his life. And how would you do that? Edward looked at the headmaster's head before saying. Didn't you always have a suspicion that Voldemort was not dead? Or that the scar on Harry's head was not as simple as it seems? Dumbledore's heart skipped a beat, however, his face remained calm. What do you mean exactly? Voldemort survived by making Horcrux. And Harry Potter is an accidental one. Dumbledore's brow creased slightly after hearing this, then he placed a piece of candy in his mouth. Meanwhile, after a brief pause, Edward continued. As you can imagine, unless Potter is killed, Voldemort will forever exist. However, as a form of compensation, I can remove Voldemort's soul left in his body. The room became silent as the headmaster thought to himself. Is what you said true? I do not need to lie about something like this. In that case, I will get back to you later. No problem, replied Edward. Now that I'm here and finally remember, I would like to ask you, headmaster, to find a better teacher for the Defense Against the Dark Art class. Professor Lockhart is not competent enough for this job. I have my reason to hire Gilroy. Edward sighed, then he said. I understand that you might want to teach Harry Potter some profound lesson by having a person like Lockhart as a teacher, but it is not okay to waste these students an entire year of learning opportunity to do so. So, I'm not asking you to change Professor as a suggestion or a concerned staff member of this school, but as one of the governors of Hogwarts. You have 1 month to find a qualified teacher, otherwise, the Board of Governors will intervene in the management of the school. Now, have a nice day, Professor. I will see you during dinner time. So, what I'm going to say might offend a lot of people, but I will say it anyway. I do not found Tonk's metamorphmagus ability to be important enough to be part of Edward's group. I mean, anyone who can use human body transfiguration is as useful as her, so she would most likely not be part of the inner group or harem. You've been warned. Title: Wizardkind Family Development Plan. Chapter 87. Wizardkind Family Development Plan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and The Otsutsuki Clan. A legacy of blood and destruction, it's a Naruto fanfic with an evil MC born in the Otsutsuki clan. Join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princess_ty__________________________________________. After Edward left, Dumbledore stayed in his office while thinking. A few minutes later, someone else came in. Albus, why did you call me? Minerva, I need you to send a letter to Lupin inviting him back to school. Invite him back for what? To be the new Dada professor. Dada, Defense Against the Dark Art. Oh, Albus, did you finally change your mind? From what happened in the last few classes, it is obvious that Lockhart is nothing but empty talk, replied Professor McGonagall. Well, the Hogwarts Board of Governors were not happy with my choice, so they asked me to change it, effective immediately. I thought the board rarely intervenes in the affairs of the school. Now that they are most likely under Edward's control, the situation should change permanently. Albus, did they fire you? Or plans to? The current situation does not seem that dire, but who knows what will happen in the future. Minerva was silent for a moment, then she asked. What about Lupin's condition? Will that be a problem? If it is, then Edward will solve it, replied Dumbledore calmly. What do you mean by this? If my guess is correct, his next major step is to control dark creatures like werewolves and vampires. Given how marginalized and discriminated these creatures are by society, as long as he invents a potion or spells that allow them to control their transformation, and promise them to be treated normally by society, they will give them their undying loyalty. Professor McGonagall did not know what to say, so she sighed and decided to go and contact Lupin. However, right before she left, Dumbledore asked her to send Harry Potter to his office. A few minutes later, Harry entered the headmaster's office, but he did not see anyone else. Even Fawkes. Except for a snake that was glaring at him. Although Harry was scared at first, soon, he started to speak in a strange language, following which, the snake seemed to listen to a common and just laid curling on the floor. Soon afterward, Dumbledore walked in from somewhere. The Potter family and the Gaunt family never had any connection from what I know, so there is only one way for Harry to be a Parseltongue. Scene break. Edward was walking in the hallways with the caretaker, Argus Filch. He said. Are you ready? I've been ready for my life. But, are you sure that there won't be any problem? Edward patted his shoulder and said. You should believe in my reputation. Soon, the two of them arrived in a room in the castle. Inside was Headmaster Dumbledore, Vice-Headmistress Minerva, Minister of Magic Fudge, Amelia Bones, Crouch Sr., and Rita Skeeter from the Daily Prophet. As soon as the two of them arrived, everybody's gaze was directed at them, to be precise, directed at Filch. Taking a deep breath, the squib entered the room. Soon afterward, a potion was handed over to him. Without much hesitation, he drank the entire bottle. Despite how horrible it tasted. Then, he waited with bated breath. Time seemed to be passing too slow for him, however, he knew that he had to be patient. 5 minutes later, when he was about to be disappointed, a surge of energy blasted from his body. With the utmost election, Filch started to wave his hand and transform a chair in the room into different animals. Snacks, birds, mice, etc. He was like a child who had just gotten a new toy. Meanwhile, Rita Skeeter's eyes lit up after seeing this, so she started taking pictures. Then, she interrupted Filch by asking. How do you feel being the first squib to awaken his magical abilities? It felt great. I can finally use magic just like these children. Then, Filch took Edward's hand and shook it firmly. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. No problem. From now, there will be no more squibs in the magical world. Many of the people in the room sighed as they knew that once again, Edward Bones will change the magical world, for the better. After that, Rita asked him a few questions, then she asked Minister Fudge. Minister, how do you feel about this discovery? Any plans on how to maximize the benefit of this potion?" Fudge straightened up his clothes, then answered. "Of course. I will personally oversee Mr. Bones' ceremony to award him a first-class Merlin medal. Although he already has many of them, I'm sure he won't mind a new one. Additionally, I ask that all squibs acquire this potion to awaken their magical abilities." Rita Skeeter nodded nonchalantly, then she walked to Amelia and asked. "Madam Amelia, the same question. I believe this invention is the perfect opportunity to raise the population of the wizarding world." "Oh, could you please elaborate more?" "One of the reasons that many families are not having children is because they feared giving birth to squibs, but with this new potion, all families can be guaranteed to always give birth to wizards." "That is indeed true, but what about the other issues?" "The other main issue with the low birth rate in the wizarding world has to do with the financial situation of many families. The best way to solve this problem is for the Ministry of Magic to create special funds for all wizard families that will help raise their children until they turn into an adult. The more children have, the more money then they can receive from this fund. What Amelia and Edward want to do is pay some families to have as many children as possible, thus increasing the population of wizards." While this interview was going, Edward was communicating with Dumbledore on the side. "I have found a new professor for the data class, and he should be here in a few days," said Dumbledore. "Oh, and who would that be?" "His name is Remus Lupin. But I have a few concerns. If you are referring to his status as a werewolf, then I have a way to deal with it. And if you are also talking about the curse that Voldemort placed on the position, then I will also deal with it." Dumbledore glanced at Edward, then he answered. "In that case, I'm relieved." Soon afterward, the interview was finished, but some people were not happy. For example, Minister Fudge. His limelight was stolen by Amelia Bones, and he was not happy about it. So, after everyone left their separate ways, he stayed at Hogwarts to talk to Dumbledore. "So, it was brought to my attention that Cedric and the twins were not in the same year, and I'm sorry about the mistake. If it bothers anyone, then imagine that in this alternate universe, they do." Title: One More Problem Solved. Chapter 88. One More Problem Solved. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and The Otsutsuki Clan. A Legacy of Blood and Destruction. It's a Naruto fanfic with an evil MC born in the Otsutsuki clan. Join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstypy________________________________________________________________________________and Minerva, Snape, and Flitwick were waiting with a little anxiety on their faces. In front of them was Harry Potter, who was looking at everyone with a look of confusion on his face, wondering why these professors called him here. "Would there be any problems?" asked Dumbledore. "Besides a little pain, there should not be," replied Edward calmly. "Should?" asked Professor McGonagall. "Well, we are dealing with the soul after all, so I cannot say 100% guarantee," added Edward. He then took out his wand and pointed at Harry's scar. But he paused for a moment. "Okay, I lied. This will hurt a lot." A white light flew from his wand and hit Harry's scar. Soon afterward, Edward found himself in a white room with no one in sight. He knew that he was in the soul space, a special dimension existing in the human body that holds the soul. He currently was in Harry Potter's soul space. And the reason that the entire place was entirely white was a form of self-protection. As one of the most important parts of the human body, of course, it has to be protected. Unfortunately, most people do not know nearly enough about the soul to enact their defense, so a subconscious one is usually developed on their own. Waving his wand, the scenery then suddenly changed. Edward found himself in a house with many rooms. In one of the main one, Harry Potter was sitting there talking to two other people. His mother and father. Edward knew that those were just projections. The real soul space is usually in the appearance of something that makes their owner very happy, that even if it is a fantasy. Without disturbing Harry and his family, Edward used a tracking spell to find any intruder or things that should not be here. Soon, in one of the very hidden rooms, he saw a small dot-looking baby Voldemort lying in a fetal position. With a wave of his wand, he started to remove it from its position, and of course, it resisted. Meanwhile, in the real world, Edward was just standing motionless with his eyes closed, and still in the position of his wand extending. As for Harry Potter, he fell to the ground after the first spell was cast. Luckily, he was caught by Dumbledore. At first, everything seemed peaceful and quiet, but Potter started screaming while holding his head like a pig that was about to be slaughtered, and this lasted for 5 minutes. The other professors had to cast a noise-canceling charm on the room in order not to alert the other students. After 5 minutes, Edward opened his eyes, then a small light flew from Harry's body. Without pause, he took out a diamond and placed it inside. Meanwhile, Snape quickly checked the poor boy's condition. "He's fine, just passed out because of the excessive pain." Then, he fed him a potion. Dumbledore then asked, "What about the other Horcruxes?" "In safe hands," replied Edward calmly. The headmaster paused for a moment, then he did not ask any more questions. As for Edward, he suddenly thought of something and he said, "While I still remember, let's deal with our other problems." He walked towards one other classroom, while the others followed out of curiosity. Soon, they arrived in front of the Dada classroom. Edward took out the previous diamond with Voldemort's soul and cast a spell. A green light came from the diamond and touched the floor. Suddenly, all the professors felt like Hogwarts Castle came alive, and Edward was connected to it. Of course, the person most surprised was Dumbledore. As the headmaster of the school, he has some special permission granted to him by the castle itself, hence the reason he can still apparate while inside. After the connection was established, Edward cast another spell. Following this, a mass of dark clouds suddenly came from the Dada classroom, and Edward took out a teapot and placed the cloud inside, before sealing it away. During the entire process, all the professors watched quietly with a little awe in their eyes. As intelligent as they are, some of them have heard of the curse that Voldemort once placed on the position of the defense against the dark arts. And now, Edward seemed to have removed it. As for how he did, they have no clues. The process is very simple once you know the source of the curse. Since Hogwarts Castle once belonged to Salazar Slytherin, he placed a charm on it that granted his descendant certain control or permission in the castle. As the true heir of Slytherin, Voldemort sacrificed his control in exchange for placing a powerful curse on the position of Dada. So, Edward used his soul to reinstate the control over the castle and removing the curse. Scene break. A large crowd was gathering in a dark alley. There were hundreds of them, and oddly enough, all of them were werewolves. Someone went to great lengths to invite the majority of werewolves that were on the dark side of the law in many magical communities across the world. Soon, someone appeared in the center of the dark alley where a small speaking stadium was located. It was Edward. And the majority if not all of these werewolves identified his identity. As soon as he appeared, he became the center of attention. Then, his voice rang to all the people attending. "All of you here are outcasts of the magical world. For many of you, the reason for that is due to your choices and actions, while for some, it is simply a result of circumstances. But tonight, I will give all of you a chance to change your fate." He waved his hand, and 2 potions floated in the air. One blue and one red. The blue potion will allow you to freely control your transformation, and make it so that your bit does not infect anyone. With it, you will no longer be feared and cast out by the magical world, you can live an ordinary life. It only requires one dose and you will be set for the rest of your lives. Finally, the way to get this potion is to sign your name at the Ministry of Magic and one will be granted to you free of charge. The red potion is entirely different. After taking it, you will not only have the abilities of the blue one but also evolve. You will have the ability to turn into a half-wolf, half-human form. In that form, you will be 3 times stronger, faster, and more durable than the average wizard. Your claws will be able to slash metals, you will have an unnatural healing factor. More importantly, you can still use a wand and magic. Many of these werewolves' breathing became rapid as they were rapidly consumed by greed, they wanted to rush to that podium and drink that red potion. Ignoring their reactions, Edward continued. Of course, as you can expect with something so extraordinary, the price is affordable to anyone. If you choose this red potion, you will have to give me your souls and wills, I will be your master for all eternity, and my words will be the absolute law from now. Now, make your choice. The dark alley became quiet after this as these werewolves contemplated a choice that can forever change their lives. Finally, one person raised her hand, but did not make a choice, but asked a question. Mr. Bones, will the blue potion be available to other countries? Yes. However, I cannot guarantee whether it will still be free there. Nevertheless, your nationality does not matter. As long as you register with the British Ministry of Magic, you can still receive a free one. At this point, Amelia has already completely controlled the Ministry of Magic and Fudge is just a figurehead. And Edward's goal is to increase the population, so stealing from other countries through this little trick is a way to go. Following this, the alley once again became quiet with people pondering their choices. However, something unexpected occurred. Someone rushed to the podium towards Edward. With a glance, the latter identified the attacker as Fenrir Greyback. Edward could see greed in his eyes. Unfortunately for the werewolf, when he reached a few centimeters from Edward's body, the ground in the podium turned into countless chains that bound him. No matter how he struggled, he could not get rid of the chains. As for Edward, he opened his eyes and made a slurping motion. Immediately afterward, Fenrir started to become thin as a mummy as powerful energy came from his body and entered Edward's. After a few seconds, he turned into a dried mummy, and a white light flew out of his body. As Fenrir fell to the floor, he was oddly petrified. This dark magic was one Edward just invented by combining the Dementor's kiss with the basilisk's ability to absorb vitality. Nodding in satisfaction at his new curse, Edward raised his head and asked. So, have any of you made your choice? The majority of these werewolves chose the red potion. After all, they were used to living on the dark side of the law, and they knew the importance of power. So, Edward had them sign a magical contract before giving them the potion. As for the rest, they chose the blue potion. At first, many people thought that Edward would not be happy with their decision and go back on his words, or prevent them from leaving the area. But they were wrong. After they made their choice, a voucher was given to them to go to the Ministry of Magic and receive their potion. Meanwhile, after this event, Edward went to another meeting, this time with vampires. He offered them to pass laws that allow the wizarding world to sell blood acquired from muggles through blood donation. As for the second option, it was magical blood that was personally cultivated by himself. This blood contained magical powers in it, thus could increase their abilities once ingested. Scene break. Late at night, Dumbledore was reading a letter that was just sent by him. Afterward, he sighed as he muttered. So, now, you are not even hiding your intentions. Then, he sent letters contacting all the members of the Order of Phoenix. Title: A Wizard. Chapter 89. A Wizard. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https:// www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and The Otsutsuki Clan. A legacy of blood and destruction. It's a Naruto fanfic with an evil MC born in the Otsutsuki clan. Join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstiapy. _________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ A week later, in a secret location, all the members of the Order of Phoenix assembled and were having a meeting. Dumbledore first introduced the situation of the werewolves and Edward's actions. I think there is nothing wrong with his actions. Over the past few days, the werewolf potion has been distributed by the Ministry of Magic, and they have started a campaign for wizards to be more acceptable to werewolves and vampires, said Professor Flitwick. It does not change the fact that he has an army of powerful dark wizards that are willing to do anything for him, replied Alastair Moody. The way I see it, now these werewolves are under control and no longer deal with the dark side of the law. I know that he is your favorite student, Flitwick, but it does not change the fact that he is dangerous. Look out how these pure blood families are acting recently. They have been supporting all the Bones family decisions. Do you think these people did this because of the goodness of their hearts? Most likely, they are under his control as well, replied Moody. Would you prefer that they wait until Voldemort resurrects himself and they serve him instead? Asked Flitwick back. Can any of you deny that Edward's action has not improved the magical world in just a short few months? No one answered, as he was right. In just a short time, the British magic world has greatly changed, and many members of the Order have benefited from these changes. An example is the Weasleys. With the new law that encourages families to give birth to more children, they received a large pension from the Ministry of Magic because they have so many children, thus dramatically improving their financial situation. The most recent example is Remus Lupin. As a werewolf who was excluded by society, the recent potion and laws have benefited him greatly. They provided him with a chance at a better life, a normal life. Additionally, the ministry has recently created many new jobs for wizards and improved the security of the country. In general, a new prosperous magical world is slowly developing in Britain. After the silence lasted for a moment, Dumbledore finally spoke. I understand that many of you may have conflicted feelings towards Edward's action, and this is perfectly reasonable considering all the good that he accomplished. However, this does not change the fact that he is headed in a direction where he will acquire absolute power. And with this kind of power, it is very easy for a person to lose themselves. So, the objective of our order is to ensure that if that day truly comes, we will be ready to intervene and prevent the magical world from suffering another devastating war. The members of the order nodded in agreement with Dumbledore, except for Flitwick. He agreed that absolute power corrupts, but he did not think that this would happen to Edward. As the person in this room who knew him best, he knew that the only reason that Edward wanted to unify the magical world was that he believed that doing so will make it easier to pool all magical knowledge of the world together, then have as many people as possible study magic to push it forward. What the members of the order should be worried about was that Edward would become mad in his pursuit of knowledge someday, and conduct some taboo experiment. This was one of his greatest flaws. Flitwick also knew that his favorite student was aware of that flaw and planned for it. He plans to surround himself with good-natured people that can keep him in check when needed, so that one day, he does not go too far. Soon after, the Order of Phoenix meeting ended, waiting for the right time to activate. As for Flitwick, he did not tell Edward about this meeting as the latter promised him that he did not have to betray his past comrade. Furthermore, Flitwick knew that his favorite student probably had other ways of knowing what happened here. And with his current power, he might not even care about the Order of Phoenix. Scene break. Edward walked toward the room requirement with a sullen mood, and it was not because of the recent Order of the Phoenix meeting. It was very easy to spy on these people as his Marauder map kept track of all these people, so when he noticed that they were all headed for one position, he guessed their intention. But he did not care. After entering the room of requirement, Helena was waiting for him. So, he looked at her, then sighed. "Are you ready?" "Yes." Edward then handed her the resurrection stone. Using the spell she was taught, she activated it. A white light came from the stone, and a few seconds later, an illusory image appeared in the room. The illusory figure was a beautiful woman with long black hair, dressed in 10th century clothes similar to Helena. She looked confused for a brief moment, then she said, "Helena. How come I'm in the world of the living?" After seeing the black stone, she seemed to have thought of something and said, "The power of law." Then Rowena Ravenclaw ignored the stone and looked at her daughter, while Edward headed to the next room to give them some privacy. 3 hours later, the two finished their talk and appeared in the room. Edward was waiting for them. He could see a brilliant golden light around both of their bodies, and he could guess the reason for it. So, he secretly sighed. He knew this would happen, so he was somewhat prepared. "You must be Edward. I have heard many good things about you. I would like to offer my sincere gratitude for giving our mother and daughter the chance to reunite once again." Edward smiled reluctantly before replying. "Since I promised her to find a way to resolve her resentment, then I will keep my words." Mrs. Ravenclaw nodded. "I understand you are a wizard pursuing knowledge as I did, and as much as I would like to have an exchange with you, many of my memories especially about magic are gone. So, I can only give you my sincere thanks. However, I have a feeling that we will meet each other again, one way or the other." Edward frowned as he started worrying after hearing this. "Are you worried about death doing something to us in the afterlife?" asked Ravenclaw. "Well, you do not need to. The restrictions placed on him are far more severe than you can imagine. This is the price that mortals have to pay from pursuing powers beyond their understanding." "Mortal?" asked Edward with great surprise. "Are you saying that Death used to be a wizard?" "That's correct. Albeit a very gifted one, but one nonetheless. Unfortunately, that is all I can remember. However, with this information, you should be able to discover more." Edward nodded his head, then thanked Ravenclaw for the information. Then, he watched as the two of them turned into golden lights, and traveled to the afterlife. Edward sighed as today, he lost a true confidant. So, he decided to break one of his rules and went drinking until he was wasted. Underscore 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 title. Resignation. Chapter 90. Resignation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and The Otsutsuki Clan. A Legacy of Blood and Destruction. It's a Naruto fanfic with an evil MC born in the Otsutsuki clan. Join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstapy underscore 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 underscore. Edward was staring at the mirror in front of him while discussing with the person on the other side. "Are you all right? You don't look too good," asked Amelia. "I'm fine, I just recently lost a close friend. And it seemed that she meant more to me than I realized. Do you want to talk about it?" "I'm not that fragile. I know that men, in general, do not like to talk about their emotions," said Amelia. "But if you ever need someone to talk to, know that I'm always here." Edward paused for a moment, then he said, "I know. So, what did you want to talk about?" "I just wanted to report that everything was going as planned. However, I wanted your opinion on something. Do tell. Recently, Dolores Umbridge has hinted that she wanted to switch sides and be loyal to us. So, do you think I should accept it? Edward was not surprised by her action given what he knew about her from the books and movies, so he pondered for a moment. She can be useful. Our reign must have a positive image. However, we will still need to do some dirty things in the shadows, so she can be in charge of that. And if we ever need someone to take the blame for something or be the bad guy, she would be perfect for that. Amelia sighed. That's exactly what the think tank said. Then, what's the problem? I just do not like her, replied Amelia with a stoic look on her face, making Edward speechless for a brief moment as he wondered whether his aunt just contacted him to complain. In that case, don't accept her loyalty, she is not that important to the overall plan, replied Edward nonchalantly. Since his aunt did not like Umbridge, then she does not have to accept her as one of their own. No, I will not let my personal feelings get in the way of our plans. With her help, the final step will go more smoothly. Well, do as you please. This situation does not have to be a chore for you. If you do not want to do it, just tell me. I know, added Amelia before ending the conversation. Scene break. Remus Lupin walked out of his class and headed to the Great Hall to grab a meal. In his way, he smiled as he heard the students praise his class and teaching method. He was quite popular in school after just a few days. Of course, he also knew that the reason that these students thought so highly of him was that their previous professors were truly horrible. At least based on what Lupin learned in the past few days. After entering the Great Hall, he saw a few professors already having their meals at the staff table. Ignoring the usual stares of Severus, Lupin went to sit in a specific spot. To be precise, it was the spot next to Edward. Remus Lupin, he said as he introduced himself. Edward Bones, replied the latter as he shook Lupin's hand. Many of my students have a lot of praise for you. Well, it seems that I have some advantage over their previous professors. That's true, so what can I do for you? Asked Edward directly. Lowering his voice, Lupin whispered. First of all, I would like to thank you for all you have done for werewolves in the magical world. No problem. Nevertheless, I was wondering if there was a way to completely get rid of being a werewolf. I mean, not just control the changes, but turning into an ordinary wizard. Although a little surprised by this question, Edward answered. It's possible after extensive study. He lied. Edward could reverse the werewolf bloodline through the life code. However, if he did that, not many of the werewolves would be willing to serve him, and he needed to form an elite force only devoted to him. However, I'm currently very busy and do not have time for that. But it should be possible in the future. Lupin hurriedly nodded. As long as the possibility exists, then it's fine. Then he started eating his food in a happy mood. However, the peaceful mood did not last long. Soon afterward, Amelia Bones with many Aurors following her walked into the Great Hall, to the surprise of everyone present. She first saluted Dumbledore, then looked at the students and asked. Who is Ron Weasley? Please raise your hand. On the Gryffindor's table, all the students looked at Ron. Who was trembling as he thought that he was about to be arrested. Nevertheless, he still raised his hand. Amelia and the Aurors walked to him. She asked. I understand that you have a pet rat by the name of Scabbers. Where is it? Before Ron could process what was going on, the rat in his pocket jumped out and tried to make a run for it. However, the Aurors were ready and a spell hit him. Soon after that, under the shocking gaze of everyone watching, the rat turned into an ugly man. The Aurors instantly used magic to lock him in place. Meanwhile, with a calm demeanor on her face, Amelia Bones said. Peter Pettigrew, you are under arrest for your betrayal of the Potters family, thus leading to their death. Additionally, for your crime of using dark magic and killing 12 muggles. I didn't do it, I'm innocent, screamed Peter. It was Sirius Black did it. There is no need to quibble, Mr. Pettigrew, said Amelia. We have already investigated the whole situation and know that Sirius Black was not the secret keeper of the Potters, but was changed at the last minute to you, thus is innocent. After you stand trial in front of Wizengamot and are found guilty, Mr. Black will be released immediately and paid remuneration for his unjust incarceration. Meanwhile, most of the teachers at the staff table had shocked looks on their faces. Even Dumbledore had a difficult time hiding his surprise. I should have known that Sirius was incapable of doing such a thing, said Lupin. Wormtail, how could you betray James and Lily like this? They were your friends. I'm innocent, please believe me, replied Peter adamantly. He then looked at Dumbledore and said, Professor, you know me. You can vouch for me. Peter, I need you to look me straight into the eyes and tell me that you did not do it, asked Dumbledore, trying to suppress his emotions. Unfortunately, Peter Pettigrew did not dare to look at the headmaster. During the entire event, only two people remained calmed. Edward and Snape. However, the potion master was secretly holding his wand, ready to attack at any moment. It took him a great deal of restraint to not use a killing curse on Peter Pettigrew. Soon after that, Peter Pettigrew was escorted out of Hogwarts, the teachers left to deal with the aftermath, and Dumbledore called Harry to his office. Peter Pettigrew became sensational news in the British magical world as it was constantly publicized in the newspaper. With sufficient evidence, Wormtail was sentenced to imprisonment in Azkaban. Edward designed a special item for him to prevent him from turning into an animagus and escaping. Sirius Black was released and his name was cleared of all the wrongdoings. More importantly, due to negligence regarding this case, Minister Fudge resigned from his position of minister, and Amelia Dot, while running unopposed, was quickly elected for the position. With countless loyal followers, the support of 95% of British wizards, Edward managed to take over the British magical world without shedding a single drop of blood. The first step of his worldwide conquest ended. So, I planned a lot more before Fudge left office. For example, Edward used a Muggle flower known as Devil Breath to control him and made him resign. Then, Dumbledore would check Fudge to see whether he was under control or dark magic was used on him. Then, he would have Snape checked whether any kind of potion was used on Fudge. But they would not find anything, as Muggle knowledge was a blindside for even a wizard as powerful as Dumbledore. But, I realized that this was unnecessary, and decided to quicken the pace of the story, so these things were removed. Title: Foundation of Civilization.